Hey guys, I was thinking I should probably be making a video a day, and I wasn't sure exactly what I should be making tonight. But, I just got a reminder, and it's a very interesting thing that I had to consider. Well, what about why the left always loses, and why they keep losing over and over again? Now, that's a little bit of a jumping the gun kind of thing, given that they did technically win in 2020. But the thing about it is that you have to consider is that a lot of what happened in 2020 came from the actual pandemic. And the fact that a lot of the propaganda that was going around at the time actually seemed to stick. Now, after about, oh my god, almost 10 years now of liberals screeching about how Trump is the new, like, funny mustache man, it's just absolutely hilarious to me on just how far the left has fallen. For example, I was looking through some comments in a recent video of mine. Actually, two recent videos of mine. One was talking about how many liberals nowadays have completely collapsed, supporting, actual Yorkshire Terriers and, you know, a bunch of recent scandals that have happened that have destroyed the lives of many far left liberals and progressives, and why the Democrats have lost so badly. And then I made a video about conservatives, about the same thing. And in one video, I got flooded with a bunch of comments. And can you guess which one got flooded with all the comments? It was the one with all the liberals. Now, why would that be? Well, I got three comments on the ones with conservatives, one calling me a nerd, one calling me a dork, and one just laughing. Now, there wasn't any point there to be made. No one actually argued against anything that I had actually said. And in the one about liberals, no one had argued against anything I said there either. Just a whole bunch of nasty stuff. Basically saying that I should just give up and what have you. And that's exactly the thing, though, is that if those aren't all bots, which, wow, they very well could be, saying that not one of them engaged with the actual point that I made, but the problem is that now it's impossible to tell who is a bot and who is a liberal, because liberals will never engage with any point that you make. They'll just either outright ignore your points or they won't say anything of value whatsoever. And they'll just start screeching and yelling and cursing you out and calling you names and saying a whole bunch of nasty stuff to you. They won't say anything worthwhile or anything that you can actually, refute or anything. But it is kinda hilarious on just how bad it's gotten. And I mean that in just like the most. Oh, it's just so sad what has happened to the Democrat Party. Now, back in the day, I voted for Obama. This was during his second term. I had not known anything to have been wrong with what he had done during his first term. After all, the news never reported on anything, and while I wasn't a religiously devoted guy to politics like I later became, the news and uh, I'm talking about like television, for example, or the news inside like newspapers or inside like Google articles, stuff that would pop up on Google, I mean, never said anything negative about the guy. They never really said anything positive either. I never actually heard them say he had like cured cancer or anything major. He had never seemed to do anything of spectacular note. Nothing that actually stuck out to me during his entire 4 years. Now, when he first got elected, I was around probably 14 or 15, somewhere around that age. And I said that after he got elected, and I was a pretty base kid, I would say, I said that, kind of like, it's interesting he got elected, but I know for a fact that a big reason he got elected is because Americans just wanted to prove to themselves that we were no longer a racist society, that we could actually accept a black president. Now, race relations absolutely, completely tanked under him, and things got a whole lot worse. Black Lives Matter, for example, actually formed under Obama because they thought that he hadn't done anything to actually help the black community, which is one reason why Trump got so many votes from the black community in 2024. Because the Democrats never seemed to actually follow through with any of their promises to help them. They actually preferred to have a actual good economy instead of the crap that was going on underneath Biden. But let's get back to the point. I knew that, it was wonderful that we actually had a black president, that we could actually, say that, well, we were no longer a racist society, but I thought to myself, and I had mentioned this to my parents uh, at the time when he got elected, that, it's probably not a great thing to only be voting on race politics. Now, I didn't know that race politics was a thing at the time, but, well, voting in a guy just because you wanted to prove you're not racist seemed a little bit insane to me. And again, like I said, no one ever criticized him during his first term. They never actually said anything wonderful he had done, as I had said. There wasn't much to say about his accomplishments. Obamacare was something that I kind of sort of supported. I was considering myself a social democrat at the time, not a democratic socialist, no. I kind of looked into it a little bit and I thought, having some kind of healthcare system for people who couldn't afford it was a good idea. And I still kind of agree with that. After all, I did join the military and I did get military health care. But, when you mass produce something like that and the government always wants to go with the lowest bidder, they might go with doctors who are not yet proven, who had just gotten out of medical school not too long ago, or haven't been practicing that long, or, maybe somebody who just charges a little bit cheaper, maybe because he's not the best around. And I've seen military healthcare screw up a few people that I work with, people that I kind of respected. One guy I very much did not respect, but at the same time, he didn't deserve the treatment that he'd gotten. Now, I'm not sure if it was negligence or just incompetence, but it never seemed like something that you could sue over or necessarily prove. But his knee had basically lost all his cartilage from years of being in the military, and they went in and they scraped all the cartilage out, and then a whole bunch of scar tissue grew in, and then they had to cut him open again and scrape out all the scar tissue. And then all the scar tissue grew back, and he was back to square one, eventually having to get out of the military. Now, this was a superior of mine at the time, and I was not a big fan of him. He literally drove me to drink. But, I mean, he wasn't always an absolutely terrible person, and it sucks what happened to him. Part of the reason why he was so angry all the time was because of the fact that he was losing a career that he had wanted to stay in. Now, he had been pretty bad at his job as well because, well, as an administrator, he was not very good when it came to S1 stuff because he had always served in an IPAC. So when he actually had to do S1 stuff, he was completely out of his depth. In fact, many of his Marines were actually way more informed about how to do S1 stuff than he did. Now, if you don't know, in the Marine Corps, we had the S1 and the IPAC. Well, that doesn't really matter anyways. Beating around the bush a little bit. But the point I'm trying to make is that when you have some kind of universal health care, the government likes to take shortcuts like with anything else. And they like to go with the lowest bidder sometimes. And sometimes you just don't get the best doctors, which is why when you have less than 1% of the country in the military and then you see universal health care on such a relatively small scale screw up and possibly ruin the lives of people who are in the military. Trying to apply that to, say, 30% of the country, you realize very quickly that the logistics get completely out of control, and then the bureaucracy just turns the whole thing into a mess. Now, I still believe in that we should have, like, some kind of Medicare or Medicaid system. It's just that it's not as efficient as I would like it to be. So I wouldn't even say that that was Obama's a huge achievement for Obama either. When 2012 came around and I was able to vote, I voted for Obama because, again, I had heard nothing highly critical of the guy, but I never heard anything terrible about the guy. And the guy he was running against, I think it was Mitt Romney. That was just so much of a cold fish to me. He was like so uncharismatic. Now, would I have preferred Mitt over Obama? Probably not. Honestly, it was basically uh, one of the YouTubers I used to watch a lot. I don't watch him as much anymore, but Sticks, Hex, and Hammer said that it was basically the same thing with a different letter behind the name. And I also didn't realize until much later that Obama had lost millions of voters from his first time around. And it was very clear to see why, especially once you get into stuff like Benghazi and other scandals that had been completely swept under the rug. It became very clear later on that one of the reasons the media never said anything negative about Obama is because they didn't want to be seen as racist. And as race relations got even worse under Obama, especially since he started to push race grifting as a core central policy, I would say policy, but it was mostly like a guilt tripping of the American people into basically just allowing people to do whatever the hell they wanted based on whether their skin was a lighter shade or a darker shade. And over time, I started to become less and less enthused about being a social democrat. A social democrat, again, in this case, being a lighter form of democratic socialism, where I believe in capitalism, I believe in democracy, or in the case, I would eventually realize that we're not a democracy either. We are a republic. Now, we do have some democratic views, like, say, voting on local city ordinances. That is a direct policy made by the people in order to enact certain, like, taxation laws, for example. Now, but for actual representation, such as Congress or state legislature and the president and our governors, as well as our local commissioners and mayors and such, we are a republic. We elect people to rule for us because we have to go to work. We have to actually do other things. We cannot be in meetings all day, every day, talking about, like, how we should repave the streets, for example, okay? Or crap like that, right? We elect people to do the job for us. And that's not laziness, it's because it's to be more productive. We want people to represent our values and our needs while we get to caring for our families and not having to spend countless hours in boring meetings legislating everything by a giant committee, making things just so much more bureaucratic. If you think our bureaucracy is bad now, just imagine when you have 340 million people. Now it's less than that. Not everybody is an adult. Not everybody is a citizen. But let's say like 200 million people all in a room trying to figure out how to who gets money for how we pay for streets with our taxes? Imagine that for a second. Like having 200 million people all arguing about where our tax dollars should go. Or something else completely and utterly ludicrous like that. Nothing would ever get done. Ever. That's why we have representatives. And that's why Congress was eventually limited to 435 representatives, plus the 100 congressmen. For the Electoral College, we also got the extra 3 for Washington, D.C., which, whatever. And then we got a few from the territories who are non-voting, but let's not get too deep into it. This is not a civics lessons, guys, but one thing about being a republic and being in a society such as ours is that we want people, again, to represent us and to represent our needs. Now, they are also the ones who bring to light or try to push certain agendas, and this can be good and this can be bad. Now, one thing that had been being pushed for quite a while was what we call trans ideology. Now, I had a very good friend of mine who was someone I actually met on Facebook. Now, this person had come to my graduation after boot camp, but before that, she was one of my artists, and I was a good friend of hers. In fact, I had lent her $2,000 in order to pay for something or other. I don't even remember what I actually gave her $2,000 for. Maybe for her car or something like that. I'm not 100% sure. I never got paid back the money, which is a little bit upsetting, but it just goes to show that I really cared about this person. In fact, at one point, she had actually proposed to me. Now, this person, if you haven't been reading what I've been putting down here, is a trans individual. And in this case, it's actually a female to male transition. So, from her perspective, she would want me to call her a man. Now, I don't do that anymore. Because as much as I love this person, as much as I cared about this person, as much as they were actually my best friend for quite a while, and this person would even make me free art and some interesting pieces as well. I really care about this person. Let's just say, I love this person. And as time went on, one thing that had turned me off from the Democrat Party and the left in general was watching this friend of mine grow and watching her transition or trying to transition into a man. And as time went on, there was changes, and not changes for the better. For example, at the job she was working in a warehouse, forklift certified, and she loved her coworkers. She had actually really enjoyed working there, and everyone there was her friends. And she could joke around, she could have fun, she could, enjoy life. And she cared about these people, and they were good to her. Now, as she transitioned and started to get, the surgeries and everything like that, she actually had her uterus and ovaries and everything removed because her family is well known for, I think it was ovarian cancer, and it actually killed her mother and her sister. So preemptively, she was already going to transition, so she had all her plumbing removed, which was a little bit upsetting to me, but at the same time, I completely understood, and it did change our dynamic though, because this was somebody that I had actually considered marrying. Now, when she proposed to me, I had turned her down, and now you would wonder exactly why. Was it because of the transition? No, it wasn't. The actual reason why I turned her down was because she had claimed to be aromantic upon everything. Meaning that, and I asked her, like, what does that mean? And it basically boils down to is that she could never love me. Like, we got along, I was her best friend, and that's a good thing when it comes to relationships. The person that you're with, you should be best friends with, someone you can trust to tell anything to. But being a romantic, according to the left, is that you cannot actually love anybody, that you can actually not have any romantic feelings whatsoever. She had completely convinced herself that that was impossible for her. And I couldn't bear to be with somebody that I loved who could never love me back. That just seems wrong in so many ways. Like, you should be able to love the person that you're married to. And after she got the hysterectomy and everything, it's like, well, now we can't have kids. And I had actually talked to her on several occasions about this. It's like, well, don't you want to have kids someday? And she said yes, she would love to have kids. But she didn't want it to be her kids. Because she believed herself, and I can't believe I'm saying this, she believed herself genetically inferior. Which is absolutely horrific to me. I mean, you can't imagine like how absolutely shocking that is. That she hated her genetics so much that she could not bear to spread them anywhere. It wasn't that, I don't think it even was that she couldn't bear to go through pregnancy. And I think we actually had talked about that specifically, that she wouldn't have problems actually going through the pregnancy, but she actually believed herself to be genetically inferior. Again, absolutely horrific. Like, self-applying that kind of ideology onto yourself is horrifying to me. Applying that to other people is equally as horrifying. I mean, it's straight up mid-century German politics in another form. And it relates a lot to just how much my mindset has been changed. I am like, to anybody who believes yourself to not be worthy of passing on your own legacy, I tell you, you need help. You actually need help. You are worth it, no matter what is wrong with you. I have had several medical conditions that are absolutely painful to live with. Trust you me, there is some horrible stuff that you can be born with that can cause you a lot of pain and suffering. But I had never once said that my life was not worth living. I love being alive. And life is precious. Precious thing. These diseases and other conditions have been around for a long time. And while they're not ideal to live with, they don't preclude you from living a happy or relatively normal life. People have been dealing with this stuff for as long as humanity has been alive, and they have survived with it. Otherwise, these diseases would have been wiped away from our genome entirely. Stuff like what I have, ulcerative colitis, for example. Now, for ulcerative colitis, the running theory is that the immune system attacks the large intestine in the body thinking that it's a parasite. Well, the running theory is that our bodies, our genome, came about with the idea that we would have bowel parasites from drinking unclean water and eating uncooked food. And therefore, we would have many parasites inside of our digestive system. Therefore, people with ulcerative colitis have higher than like immune systems that are constantly active fighting parasites that would almost always be there. And therefore, since parasites and other diseases weaken the immune system, it would balance out and the parasite wouldn't really have enough time in order to become a huge issue, and our bodies would take care of it while the immune system wasn't attacking the actual bowels themselves. But since now we always cook our food and always have clean water, ulcerative colitis is now a detriment to human society. And it has to be controlled with medication. Very expensive medication, by the way. Which is one reason why I joined the military, but I didn't know I was going to develop UC at the time. If I had UC when I tried to come into the military, I would have been disqualified. But the medication that I am now is very much paid for by my medical insurance. Since we don't have bowel parasites as often as we need to, that means my overactive immune system is now always attacking something that doesn't exist. Therefore, all the pain and suffering goes right into my large intestine, causing a whole host of issues. Now, why did my friend think of herself as inferior? Well, again, I'm not naming names. I'm not going to give you a hint on who this person is. But she had been abused in a very personal fashion by her brother when she was young. Her brother is somebody who should be in jail. And I have told her many, many times that she should report this to the police because her brother is a terrible person who should be in prison. And that if he did it to his own sister, he would do it to God only knows how many other people. And that is another thing. It eventually came to my attention that it appears that one reason that gender ideology and trans ideology have taken hold as strongly as they have is that people who transition are doing so because of issues that they had when they were younger. Now, not everybody had those kinds of issues like my friend of mine. And I'm really dancing around this subject, but that those issues, those events that happen in their lives, have made them very uncomfortable with their bodies. And therefore, they want to change their bodies. And they feel some type of self-loathing and self-hatred because they couldn't stop it, because they feel weird when they feel a sexual attraction where it reminds them constantly of the event, so they want to change themselves. Now, this is not every trans person, I'm not saying that, but this is, in this case, I believe that it was that event that caused all this. Now, why would I say that? Because it has turned out that, for example, there was a man who transitioned to female. at a relatively young age, or maybe even middle age. I'm not 100% sure, but this story is well reported on. It's a factual story that actually happened. I just don't remember all the details. And you can look it up, and I may even look it up and give the full story about it at some point as a refresher to it. But this man transitioned to female, did the whole bottom surgery and everything. And then this dude eventually developed Alzheimer's and was absolutely horrified every single waking moment of his day on what had happened to his body. Because when he looked down, his manhood was gone. And he was absolutely horrified, screaming about who had done this to him, why had this had been done to him, not realizing that he had done it to himself. And there was nothing that his wife could do about it. And in this absolutely horror show of his, well, someone with Alzheimer's could never get some kind of restoration surgery because someone with Alzheimer's is not able to consent to the surgery. If that person was actually trans, who actually believed themselves to be a female, then the Alzheimer's should not have affected the choice in the matter. They should have actually felt relieved every time they looked down and saw that there was nothing there. Because after all, if they're a female on the inside, this would feel like the most natural thing in the world to look down and not see anything. But that clearly wasn't the case with this good gentleman, and was absolutely horrified with it. It appears, and this has been substantiated by studies, that people who go through gender transition often don't get any better. And the running theory is that they are chasing the symptoms, but not the cause of the symptoms. That some event or some other issues in their lives convince them that they are uncomfortable with their bodies, and it may actually be a physiological issue where it is very uncomfortable for them to interact with their private bits without it causing some kind of discomfort or even pain. Or it might be a traumatic event in their life. But since they don't treat the core issue on what's causing the feel of dysmorphia, they are only treating the symptoms. And since the original cause of their depression and anxiety have not been treated, they just get worse mentally every single day. Especially since now they are also taking in hormones that are completely unbalancing the natural composition of their body, and therefore causing mood swings, depression, anxiety, adding on to their already existing problems. And this is what happened to my friend. Eventually, those friends in the warehouse became enemies. She could no longer laugh at their jokes. She could no longer take pleasure in being around them. She could no longer see them as the friends that they had been. She could no longer see them as the co-workers who cared about her. And as she lashed out more and more against them and against me, the more and more I realized that all of it, is absolute bullshit. And I would have friends that I had been friends with for a long time. People that I have lent money to. Thousands of dollars. I have lent money to many people. $3,000 here. Because after all, The left had told me over and over again that I'm privileged. Now, I never really bought into that. And even in my own head, I could never see my friend as a male. And I beat myself up over that, trying to convince myself that no, they really are this way. It's really what they say is the truth, not the biological reality. No, it's what she has been telling me all these years, that she is male, and I should just accept that and let her live her life. And yet, I watch my friend go from somebody that anyone could get along with, that anyone could care about, that anyone could love, that anyone could have a conversation with, to somebody who was a paranoid, angry, depressed, anxious wreck of a human being. Absolutely, completely, and utterly destroyed mentally. And what had changed in all those years? She transitioned. She was on hormones. She couldn't lose weight. She had lost her sister. All things that could cause anxiety. But nothing to this extent. After all, I was still one of her best friends. Many of her best friends were still around. Friends she was still hanging out with, still talking to. People who loved and cared about her. She had a support system. And yet, I only ever saw her get worse and worse and worse. And then start to buy in to very disturbing liberal propaganda. Stuff that, from my perspective as someone in the military, I had seen people and talked to people who had been gender transitioning in the military. And, well, they seemed perfectly fine, relatively speaking. And I had seen animations on how these surgeries are actually done, especially on males, which was a horrifying thing to actually stumble on Facebook. In fact, it was so horrifying that I may have even reported the animation. But it was... I don't think I did. I think I left it because it was an educational thing. Because it showed exactly what you have to do to the male manhood in order to make it into a whole. Again, absolutely horrifying, but if someone wanted to do that to themselves, despite the fact that it looks like absolute torture, I mean, it's their prerogative, is it not? And yet, as more and more of my friends became more and more liberal, more and more involved in liberal politics, the more they bought into the BS that was being spread, and more they started to fall into these lines, the more and more I saw them go absolutely rabidly insane. And as I never really changed, in fact, I have only gotten calmer and more relaxed and more comfortable over time. Now, I should be working out way more. I mean, God, I'm still a stick. I should be going to the gym more often, but I never fallen into that kind of absolute delusion, I would say. Or I have gotten angry, but I'm still one of the traits I've always sought in my life is to be self-aware, to know when I'm going too far, to know how I think. This was something I actually learned in school. And I think I actually learned this from a liberal teacher. And this teacher was actually my track coach. And he didn't stay my track coach, but he became, he was my microeconomics and macroeconomics teacher. And He was also my track coach, and he led a picket line at my school for a while. And I was like, what are they picketing about? I never actually learned what they were actually picketing about. It was something to do with pay or benefits, I'm sure. And I don't know if he was liberal or not, but one of the things that he taught me in class didn't really have to do with micro or macroeconomics. And if I'm recalling correctly, I'm pretty sure it was him that taught me this, but something called metacognition, which is the idea of thinking about how you think. To examine yourself to truly understand what kind of person you are. And now you have a bias about yourself, and there is a certain limit that you can go without having somebody criticize you. Somebody who is open, honest, and not biased themselves. And that's not even always like a psychologist or a sociologist or, a liberal who will just make you feel bad about the color of your skin. I'm talking about someone who really understands you on a fundamental level, who can understand your mind better than you can. Again, the psychologist can help you with certain things, but they're not supposed to have a personal relationship with their patients. They're supposed to have a offhands kind of thing and provide more general help for a person. But somebody who is personally invested in you may also be biased and not be able to point out your flaws because they see everything you do as, like your parents, for example, may see everything you do as being not good enough, or they just spent too much time with you. So even the smallest little like habit that you have becomes like a huge flaw in their eyes. So truly understanding yourself is a very difficult thing, but being the person I am, I have come to a somewhat firm understanding of what kind of person that I am and how I think. So while I get angry and upset about certain political topics and say some pretty inflammatory things here or there, especially in my private day-to-day life, I know for a fact that those are things that aren't true, that things I would never act on, things that just I am saying out of frustration or anger or because I'm being ironic. Now, if you say an ironic thing enough times, you might start to actually believe it, but I'm talking about like saying that someone should be jailed for like something stupid. Like lying to the public, for example, or constantly lying to the public, like the media. No, I just think those people should go out of business. Honestly, that's how it should go. I don't think they need to be jailed for lying to the public. Otherwise, freedom of press would not be a thing, and freedom of speech would not be a thing. But if someone is constantly lying to people, then I believe that they should have their voices not be censored. Not at all. That's what the left does. But somebody who lies to the public enough should just be ignored. People should stop listening to that person. And for a narcissist, that is the perfect punishment to give to them. To give them no attention when they want all of your attention. To make them face reality that they're not important. I'm not important. Even if I were to get 10 million views per video, I'm not important. I am one out of 8 billion people. My voice, even if it would reach 1 million people, would be such a tiny fraction of the world that I would not make a giant change in the world. I have a fundamental understanding with that. So I know that as I get older and I become calmer and I become better, more social, or I become better at analyzing a situation and coming to the correct conclusion, or at least making a relatively 90% good decision, that when I see people starting to freak out, panic, become utterly delusional, becoming utterly hateful, becoming utterly intolerant, and blocking people that had given them thousands upon thousands of dollars in order to help them. And that's not even something that giving somebody money doesn't ensure that you become friends, but these are people that I had talked to for years, that I'd gotten along with for years, people that I had been very good friends with, people who had been attracted to me, who loved me, who actually, were interested in me. People that I treated fairly, that people I talked to in their times of need, people that I tried everything I could to help them, not just financially, but emotionally, mentally, intellectually, socially. People that I had spent God only knows how many hundreds of hours trying to help them. And for them to destroy their relationship for me, just because I said, I want lower taxes. Or, I think that these surgeries may be more dangerous than they're worth. Or, that, hey, maybe you shouldn't be, threatening to hurt people. Because there were a few like that who were threatening to hurt people. And I told them, stop attacking people, stop being so angry, stop saying such horrible things, stop trying to become violent, stop trying to get yourself thrown in prison. There's no reason for this. To have those people block me, push me further and further away from the left, to the point where I'm no longer a social democrat. There were people who fell into that pipeline who just didn't see the kind of monsters that they had been becoming, or had not realized just how depressed or anxious or paranoid or hateful that they had become, that somebody like me who always tries to see the best in people, who always tries to see the best in my friends, if nothing else, in the people that I have actually talked to. I can always see the worst of some Hollywood elite or some politician that I have never spoken to. And that's true of everybody, if you are not aware. People always see the worst of Trump because they never actually talked to the man. And then Bill Maher goes and sees him and then sees that he's actually a human being who's not crazy. Surprise, surprise! The guy that everyone loved not even 10 years ago actually turned out to be a very likable man if you actually bother to talk to him for 5 minutes. What a surprise! But when you have people who go completely and utterly insane, that somebody who has watched over them for years is suddenly an enemy. Well, go look at my 2 videos. Would you rather be friends with the people who commented in my liberal takedown video? Or would you rather be a friend with the people who attacked me in my conservative breakdown video? I'd rather have somebody call me a nerd or a dork than the people in that liberal video. And that's why you guys lose. You have driven every single person that cares about you away. You blocked them. You've thrown them out of your lives. You made them believe that every single liberal is an absolute lunatic. That every single person who follows your ideology is just as crazy as you are, just as hateful as you are, such as bigoted as you are, such as intolerant as you are. And that's why the Democrats lost. We're sick of it. You drove everyone who's cared about you away. Everyone who could care about you away. Everybody who would feel sympathy for you away. Maybe you have some kind of condition like ulcerative colitis. If you tell somebody that, they might feel sorry for you. But if you scream in their face for 5 minutes, calling them all these horrible names, suddenly they're not going to feel as sorry for you anymore. And they don't care what you've been through. And they don't care how much pain you've been through. Because all they see is you as a complete and utter lunatic. It might even come to a point where they think that you actually deserve that pain. Because if you're that horrible of a person, maybe you deserve it. And you deserved your loss. But anyways, the left, I didn't leave the left. The left, you left me. You left Bill Maher. You left RFK Jr. You left Tulsi Gabbard. And you left Donald Trump. Donald Trump, he had been a Democrat. He had been a Democrat. And you, every single one of you, all of you, loved him until he ran with an R after his name. And then you wonder why you lost. Bye, guys.